Hi everyone, it's Valerie Gordon from Commander in She. On today's live webinar, we talked about how to thwart your evil villain. Everybody's got an evil villain in their story. You're going to want to listen to this program for tips on how to make sure they don't get in your way. So each of my What's Your Story workshops focuses on the three main elements of storytelling. Character, the story needs to be about someone. Plot, something needs to happen in the story. There's those plot points that we make, and then there are plot twists, those things that happen to us. And narrative point of view, that's the tone or the voice of the story. As you think about your own story, that's kind of the individual narrator in your head that's talking you through your day. Of course, you're not the only character in your story. And last week, we talked about who should be in your cast of supporting characters. We identified 4 types you would want in your cast of supporting characters. You're going to want a cheerleader. And that's the person who motivates and encourages you. They tell you, you've got this. You're going to want a collaborator. That's that person who gives you ideas, who makes you think differently about things. They say, let's try this. A realist. A realist is that person who is action-oriented, keeps you thinking about plans in the future. How are you going to do this? And the relator. The relator can serve as a coach or a mentor. They've walked your path before. They say, I've been through this, and here's how I handled it. But the opposite of a supporting character is an evil villain. That's that person who gets in your way, or rubs you the wrong way, or you butt heads with them, they trip you up. So we ask these questions. What does your evil villain do? What do they actually do that is so evil? How does it make you feel? And then really getting at the problem, why does it bother you? What's the meaning of it? Now, in my full-length workshop, we talk about 10 different types of evil villains. Today, we focused on just 4. We talked about the micromanager at work or in your home life, that person who wants things done precisely a certain way that cuts off all your own creativity or autonomy. The belittler, the person who seems like their only job is to criticize you, make you feel bad about yourself. The one-upper, that competitive colleague who has to have the upper hand, who always wants to let you know they're there and doing better than you. And the fire starter, someone who at work might demand a project done at the last minute, even though you could have had months to prepare, or someone who lights a fire between 2 people, maybe making a statement that isn't entirely true, leaving you there to figure out how to manage it. Now, whether your evil villain looks like this or something else, there are things that you can do to manage the voice that you are hearing from them. So the micromanager might say, do it exactly like this. The belittler might say, you are terrible at all of this. The one-upper says, I do this better than you. And the fire starter says, this is needed right now. And then you are left with this, your response. What's going to happen? Any of these people, or whoever your evil villain looks like, is there to get an emotional response out of you. We need to respond instead with a little bit of love and a little CPR. CPR is an acronym. It stands for Controlled Processed Response. Your C is consider. Consider the intent of what the evil villain is saying. Is it perhaps a miscommunication or a misinterpretation rather than an actual evil thing that they're doing? The P is pause. Before you respond or react, you want to pause so that you can respond with information and not with emotion. That's the difference between responding and reacting. CPR, consider the intent, pause, and respond rather than react. A few other things you can do. Ask yourself why. Why does this bother me? And you're the one who determines the meaning of what you're hearing or what's happening. Define the value. If, for example, you work with a belittler who seems like all they want to do is criticize you, well, how much do you value what you are hearing or value their approach? You alone get to decide what is the value of the content. Finally, you can also switch perspective. Put yourself in the other person's shoes. What might they be trying to do that might be misinterpreted? What is their experience of the story? And perhaps does it come down to just a misinterpretation and poor communication? Because effective communication is when you understood what I thought I said. And I think we can all relate to this when we realize that sometimes we've been the evil villain in someone else's story, maybe without even meaning to, unintentionally so. Why is that? Why would we do that? Well, it's because of the concept of multi-perspectivity. Everyone has their own viewpoint, their own way of looking at things, as well as their own strong internal narrative. So sometimes our stories collide. You might be the central character of your story, but the person you're arguing with or the person rubbing you the wrong way is the central character of their own, and your storylines just don't match up. Also, everybody has their own anticipated outcome of what's supposed to happen, of what happily ever after looks like to them. And then there's the actual outcome. So if you got the promotion over someone else, or you got the praise from the boss, or your, mother-in-law likes you better than your sister-in-law, are you actually an evil villain, or do you just not fit into their storyline? And how might the opposite be true if it were the other way around? Also consider the influence of everyone's narrator. We all have a story we tell ourselves, and when external events happen, we try to make sense of them within our own narrative. That's why if someone once maybe treated you poorly, if they go ahead the next time and they're nicer, you might not trust them because of your past experience. Sometimes we make evil villains in our story because of one thing they did wrong, and they are cast that way forever. How might you turn that around? And how are you casting yourself in your very own story? Now, if you have an evil villain who keeps handing you that poison apple, my question to you would be, why do you keep taking it? Evil villains show up whenever and wherever, and they actually make great stories, but only you can decide the role that they will play in yours. I'll leave you with a quote from one of my favorite authors, Nora Ephron. She said, "Above all, be the heroine of your life, not the victim." It's your story. You get to decide what role you will play. Thanks so much for being here, and look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.